Okay, let me make sure I'm sharing.
Okay, we saw the PowerPoint.
It was the PowerPoint. Okay, awesome.
We just need the
Bring that over
presentation one.
here. Okay, awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you all. I'm super excited to be here. Um, my name is Keyara Stevenson. I serve as Director of Career Services at Howard Community College. I have my colleague Paul Martin with me. He is going to be answering any questions you all have in the chat. So please, as I'm presenting, if you have any questions in that moment, go ahead and put it in the chat and Paul will be able to assist you. But again, we are excited to be here to show you and to give you a little bit of information or maybe a refresher of how to write your resume. So we're going to craft a resume that gets you noticed as you are applying for opportunities. Also, I have this QR code. It's also at the end of the presentation. This just leads you to some more information about our office. So who are we? We are Howard Community College Career Services. This is my team. I'm super excited to work with them. I've been at HCC for, it'll be a year next month, excuse me. So I have myself, my assistant director, Amy Crawford, our career counselor, Paul Martin, and then our career specialist, Debbie Curry. We are all here to support you. So an amazing thing about our office is not only do we serve our students and our alumni, but also we serve our community, whether it be through presentations like this or maybe some events. And then also, if you need a quick resume review or you need any assistance with searching for opportunities, we can assist you through scheduling an appointment, or we also have some drop-in hours throughout the week. So again, we are here to assist you. Okay, so this may be a refresher, but what is a resume? In simple terms, it is an advertisement of you. I like to say it's a snapshot of your skills, your experience, your educational background. With resumes have changed throughout the year. So where you might have been able to use one resume to apply for, 20 different jobs, now you have to make sure that you create a target resume. That doesn't mean you have to create a resume from scratch each time you apply for a job, but you might have to do some tweaking to make sure that it is targeted, your experience is targeted and relevant to what it is that you're applying to. Also, throughout this presentation, you'll see a couple of links. We will have a handout that we will put in the chat so you have access to all of these links that you can click on and look at those resources. Formatting. So again, just some quick information about formatting. You want to make sure that it is readable, right? You want to make sure that you have efficient and sufficient space. So you might have a lot of words on your resume, right? But you want to make sure that your margins maybe a half an inch or at least 1 inch margins around your resume so that all your information is not compressed and it's easily readable. These are a couple fonts that you want to stick to. I'm not going to read them all, but here are some fonts that you can choose to write your resume in. And the biggest thing I would say for formatting is the template that you use or the format that you use. We do encourage people to stay away from templates. What is a template? Maybe you're looking to create a resume or maybe update your resume and you want it to look more modern, quote unquote modern. So sometimes people will go online and find a fancy template, what I like to say. Maybe a column template or a resume template that has pictures or your headshot or maybe some images. You want to stay away from that. And I'm going to explain why you want to stay away from templates. We try to encourage people to just use an easy format such as using a Word doc. Just something very simple that has your information, your experience, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So again, if you all have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Paul's going to be there to assist you. Okay, so what not to include on your resume? An objective statement. So at this point, we're more so moving into a professional summary or profile. So again, I have a slide for that, but I'm assuming we have experience, right? So an objective statement is usually one of those short statements that you might see somebody in entry level or somebody who is like a student. We might move towards an objective statement, but for more experienced professionals, we want to look at a professional summary. An email, an unprofessional email. So I always like to give the example of when I was in high school. I was a basketball player, and at that time, Michael Jordan Allen Iverson were like the big basketball players. So my high school email was Mysterious Baller. That's not a professional email, right? So I can't use that if I'm going to apply for jobs. So you want to make sure you have a professional email, something like your first name, or maybe your first initial and then your last name, some variation of that, to add onto your resume. Again, we want to stay away from the unprofessional email. You don't want to put your full mailing address on your resume. Now, this might be something that people say to add to your resume, but I'll give you some reasons why you shouldn't. One reason is your resume, again, it's an advertisement, right? You might pass out your resume at a job fair or a networking event. You might send your resume to different recruiters, right? You don't want to let everyone know where you live, right? So it's a safety precaution, one, but also there has been some studies out there about discrimination. So we want to stay away from adding our full mailing address. You can put your city and state, but also stay away from adding your zip code. Again, there have been some studies that show some hiring discriminations where people may search for where you live or what zip code you're in. So again, to remove that from your resume. Now, of course, on your application, that's a different process. You probably do have to add that information, but at least on your resume, which is the first thing that most people look at, you want to leave that off. So again, you can add your city and your state, but stay away from adding your full mailing address. Multiple phone numbers, just add one. What's your primary phone number that you want recruiters or employers to reach out to you about if they want to schedule an interview? So again, just one phone number. And then your personal information. Of course, you never want to add your social security, your marital status, your nationality, sexual orientation, spiritual beliefs. Those do not belong on resumes, okay? Headshots. Now, again, some people might add this to the resume, but to remove bias and discrimination, you do not want to add your headshot to your resume. Now, and again, we do encourage you to add like your LinkedIn, which you all will have a presentation on LinkedIn. Now, in your LinkedIn profile, you'll have, of course, a headshot. But with the resume being the first thing that employers are usually looking at in your application, you don't want to add a headshot on your resume. Okay. Elaborative formats, we've already talked about this, so stay away from the fancy templates, even though they might look nice. And you don't want to put any images or anything like that on your resume. Also, be mindful and make sure that you review and edit your resume to ensure that there are no grammatical errors. So going into why we want to stay away from the fancy templates, the columned resumes, is because of applicant tracking systems. Now, unfortunately, I cannot tell you if every employer out there that's hiring uses an applicant tracking system. But one thing I do like to share is where years ago you might have submitted a paper application. Those days are really gone now. When we apply for a job, we're usually submitting that electronically. We're submitting it into some type of system to an employer. Now, some employers might say, hey, email your resume and your cover letter to this email. That's a little different. That may not go through an applicant tracking system. But I will say a lot of organizations do use some type of applicant tracking system. So that's why we want to create a targeted resume, but also that's why we want to create a resume that is easily readable, because it has to get through that system. I always say you have to beat the machine in order to get to human eyes. So you want to make sure that in your resume, when you're creating a targeted resume, you want to use keywords that you see in the job description. So if it's asking that you have supervising experience. If you have supervising experience, you want to make sure that you're using those words, right? So it's not a copy and paste from the job description onto your resume, but you want to make sure that you're hitting those keywords. So again, the ATS system can pick up those keywords, okay? So applicant tracking system, I should have explained this before. It is a system that employers use for hiring and recruiting purposes. So I have an image over to the right side that kind of encompasses what the applicant tracking system does for the employer side. So these systems, again, they will collect all of your materials that you have to submit for your application, whether that be your resume, a cover letter, it might be letters of references or recommendation, it may be transcripts, there are a lot of different things that some companies may ask when you're applying for these jobs. So again, just be mindful that some companies do use applicant tracking systems, and there are different types of systems out there. This is a great, I would say, a great resource to just Google and learn a little bit more about it. But I think it's important to mention this is why we encourage people to tweak their resumes when they're applying for certain jobs, or to make sure they stay away from the templates that are not easily readable from the scanner. Okay, so sections of a resume. Just a quick breakdown of what you may see in a resume. This is just an example or an image of a resume, but you want to, of course, have your contact information. Remember, not adding your full physical address, but you want to make sure that you have your name, your contact information, have your professional summary, your skills section to highlight any of those relevant skills that you have that they're looking for in the role that you're applying to, any certifications or licensures that are relevant to the job. Of course, your experience section. Sometimes people will break those into different sections. So you might have an array of different professional experience, right? But if you're applying to a customer service role, then if you have any customer service experience, you might have all your experience in one section that says experience. But if you want to break it out, maybe you have customer service experience, but maybe you also have experience working in retail. You want to have a relevant experience section that talks about your customer service experience. And then you might have a general work experience that highlights your transferable experience or skills that you learned in your retail experience. So there are different ways that you can create and craft your resume. It's not a one size fits all. I do want to make that clear, but these are just some sections that you might see on your resume. Of course, your education section, any organizations, professional organizations or membership that you have. Again, it's great if it's relevant to what you're applying to. And again, depending on your specific experience, you might have different sections or different ways of naming the sections, but I just wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of what that could look like. So contact information, we're kind of just going to go through and break down each section. So this is where, of course, you have your contact information, so your name. You want to have, of course, as you can see at the bottom, you can have your city and state, just do not put your zip. You can have, of course, one phone number, your primary phone number, your email. So you want to make sure that you're using professional emails we mentioned. So I have an example here. I have my first initial, my last name. I added a number at the end. That's fine. And I use the Gmail. So you can use, of course, Gmail, Outlook, um, any of those other ones out there. But I would say it would be good to create an email specific for job hunting, so that if you have another email, you're not getting littered with job opportunities, or maybe if you sign up for a job search engine and they're sending you opportunities, a lot of people will create an email specific for their job search. Of course, you want to add your LinkedIn URL if it is updated. And again, you are going to have a presentation on this, but you want to make sure that you do. I would encourage you to have a LinkedIn. Also, make sure that you are using it and it's updated, because some employers or recruiters will search for you on LinkedIn. So it's good to add your URL, your link to your LinkedIn to your resume. Also, make sure that your hyperlinks are active on your resume, especially if you are submitting it electronically, because again, an employer might click on your email to email you to set up a interview, or to say, hey, congratulations, we would like to hire you, right? So you want to make sure that that email is hyperlinked as well as your LinkedIn, so that if they want to click on your LinkedIn, it takes them right to your page. Okay, so your professional summary or profile, I will say this can be a little tricky because it's not a one size fits all as far as what information goes into it based on your individual experience. But I do want to make sure that you all know that as employers are skimming, excuse me, scanning or skimming your resume, the initial scan only about 6 to 8 seconds. That's not a long time. So again, you want to make sure that your summary is impactful, right? You want to make sure that you're highlighting those relevant skills and experience and what you can bring to the employer in that section. Your summary can be about 3 to 4 lines of information. again, it's one of those things that you want to tailor to each role that you're applying to, because maybe some of the skills or experience you highlight for one role doesn't fit the next role that you apply to. So you might have to tweak it a little bit to make sure that it is relevant to what you're applying to. Also, you want to stay away from some of those cliche words that might be used unless you can show proof. So hardworking, unfortunately, although I know a lot of people are hardworking, it is very true. But it's one of those qualities that a lot of people use, unfortunately. So try to find something else to use. And there's a lot of great resources out there that can give you some action power verbs or some qualities that you can add into your resume that's not those overused phrases. So I would encourage you to use those, and we can share that information as well. So I just wanted to give you an example of what this could look like. And the example is for a customer service professional. So this example says an experienced leader, right, with 15 years of experience. And so if I say I'm experienced, but I only have maybe 1 year of experience, you could be experienced, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that experience now. 10 years, 15 years of experience can definitely show that you are an experience and that you know what you're talking about, right? So it gives a little bit of information as to what type of skills or experience you would bring in this role because of the past experience that you do have. It also talks about what you're skilled in. So it hits on a couple of those skills that are relevant to maybe what you're applying to. And you're talking about bringing strategy to the employer. So again, here's a little formula here as to how to craft your summary that goes at the top of your resume after your contact information. Who you are, what you offer, and why it benefits the employer. That's what employers want to see in those few seconds that they're skimming your resume, okay? Entice them to want to read your resume a little bit more. So your skills section. Now, skills is an area where some people will put it in different areas on the resume. We do encourage you actually to add it to the top of your resume underneath of your summary. Now, again, in your summary, we hit on a couple of those top skills, but we're not listing every skill that we have that's relevant to the position, right? We're only hitting on a couple of those skills in our summary. So your next section could be skills. Now, again, it can be headed, it can be named different skills, competencies, whatever it is that you want to mention. But these are some of the skill sections that you can add to this area. So maybe you're going after a role that requires some technical skills. You want to make sure that you're adding any of those technical skills that you have, whether it be programming languages, software proficiency, any tools that you have. So if you are proficient using the internet, that is amazing, but that is one of those things that employers do tend to assume people know how to use. So you don't have to put, um, Google, right? You don't just want to put I'm proficient in Google or the internet. You may want to mention that you're proficient in the Google Suite or what applications within Google Suite or Microsoft Office Suite. So if you're proficient in Word, Microsoft Word, or maybe Google Docs, you want to add those into your technical skill sections. Now, some people may say, well, everybody uses Microsoft Office, so it's a given. It's not. So if that is something that you have, you want to make sure that you add that to your resume. And then we talk about maybe some of those interpersonal skills. Some people call them soft skills, some people call them interpersonal. You want to make sure that you add some of those, right? So if you're going again after a customer service role, or you're going into a front facing or a serving role, adding some of those interpersonal skills are going to be important. Do you know how to communicate with people, whether it be verbal or nonverbal? Are you proficient and comfortable with public speaking? These things do matter for some of the roles that you may be applying to, right? Are you effective in problem solving? Everyone is not great at problem solving or de-escalating or providing customer service experience, right? So again, any of those relevant skills that you have that are beneficial for what you're applying to, make sure that you list them out. The experience section. Now, I will say this is probably, as we assist students, community members, alumni with resume reviews, this tends to be the area that we focus on the most. Is because, again, resumes have changed a lot over the years. So how do we set up our resume? How do we talk about our experience? I would say the format that we use the most, it's not the only format, but we do tend to stick to reverse chronological as far as how we list out our experiences. So if we have work experience, we want to go from most current to descending order. I would say include jobs within the last 10 years. Some people may say 5 years. It really depends on your experience level. So we're going to stick with within the last 10 years. Those are the experiences that you want to add to your resume. And this also goes back to ensuring that we don't add ageism into the conversation. So that's why we don't want to add maybe a role that we had, 20, 30 years ago. My first job when I was in high school was Subway. I love the job, but it's not on my resume anymore, right? So we want to stay within that time frame. You want to make sure that you include your company and organization name, the city, state of the organization, excuse me, position title, and then the date ranges. Now, there are different formats that you can use that will take away the date ranges. So again, we don't want to introduce ageism, but if we stay within those last 10 years, it shouldn't be an issue. You want to make sure that you are bulleting your information. Some experience sections, after adding the organization, all that information, some people kind of write it in a narrative. Their experience in or responsibilities, their accomplishments, they'll write it in a narrative form. We actually want to stay away from that because generally the human eye reads bullets way easier, which is why even as I'm presenting, you see bulleted information, right? It's easier to read, it's more organized and formatted. So as we are talking about our experiences, the skills that we gained or the accomplishments that we made within those roles, we want to put this information in bullets. And we want to start those bullets with action power verbs. Action power verbs are something like if you supervise, you might start out with supervise X, Y, and Z or led a team, right? Led, supervise. Those are those action power verbs. And again, if you Google action power verbs for resumes, there are a lot of great information and articles out there that gives a list of action power verbs, and some of them will even tell you in different experiences which action power verbs you should use. And I'm going to make sure I add that to the chat because I have a great resource for that that explains all of that information. Quantify, quantify, quantify. I put that there for a reason because as we explain our experience, we tend to just focus on our duties. What do we do, right? And I always tell people if we think in the mindset of a hiring manager, right? A hiring manager or recruiter might be the one who is going through these applications, reading your resume. If everyone who applied for, I'm going to keep saying customer service, that's just going to be my experience for this presentation. If we're all applying for this customer service role, maybe of the 20 candidates that are, maybe they're interested in those 20 candidates, if all 20 candidates only speak about their duties within the role, well, we all have similar experience. How do we stand out? We stand out when we take it a step further and we add an accomplishment. And I would say in that accomplishment, if you can add any quantified or numbers, data, that also paints a more vivid picture of the experience that you provided or the outcomes and the accomplishments that you have. So again, if I have two candidates that have similar experience, similar roles, right, but only one lists their duties, I answered customer inquiries, right? If I only put that, that's just my duty, my responsibility. But if I take it a step further and say I answered over 100 calls, customer calls and inquiries per day, that gives a little bit more context, right? And then if I put an additional section to it, or I'll add and stress that accomplishment saying that I have a certain approval rate or satisfaction rate. Maybe I had some customers that completed that survey and I have that information or that quality assurance, right? That takes it a step further to show not only did I quantify my information, but I also gave some type of accomplishment at the end. Now, I will say with the quantified information, don't stress. Everyone might not have privy to that information, or you might not remember. Maybe you were in a role maybe a year ago, 5 years ago, that you're like, okay, I just don't have that information. You could probably still stress your accomplishment. What were the results or the outcomes in that role, right? So even if you're not able to say a percentage or maybe a number, you can still say, did you have, increase, maybe you increase your quality assurance, right? So instead of using numbers, you might use like increase, boosted, enhanced, those words that kind of quantify, not quantify, I would say qualify your accomplishments. Again, this is probably the area that we spend the most time on working individually with people. So again, it may be different for each person, but you do want to at least stress your accomplishment, your results, your outcomes, even if you're not able to add that quantified information. If you can, amazing. And this next slide just gives a little bit of information as to how we can move from just a duty based or responsibility based to giving that outcome. So kind of what I mentioned, assisted customers or inquiries or complaints. Now we've added some quantified information to say this is the amount of customers that I on an average. It could be an average ballpark number. Now, if you know, if you know your number is closer to 50, but you put 200, that's where we get into the lying game. So we want to stay away from lying. We want to try to give closer to that ballpark range of, 50 or maybe it was 60 customers that we assisted, right? Or the other example, or maybe you supervise or you manage a team. Great. That's great experience, right? But how many people were on your team? Again, give that hiring manager a little bit more information so that they can get a clearer picture of your experience and your outcome, excuse me. And again, for the tip, just gives a little bit of a formula of how you can set up your bullets. So again, you want to start with your action power verb. You can then talk about the task or the responsibility, and then you want to add that result, whether it adds a number or maybe you're just adding those words that kind of give a little bit of qualifying to what you accomplished. Okay. I don't believe I have any questions so far. So again, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop those in the chat. We'll make sure that we answer those.
Excuse me one second, Kara. We
Sure.
actually have a ton of questions, and
Oh, awesome.
I was waiting for you to sort of take a breath. And I would like to, I'm looking for Paul's responses, but I don't see them in chat. So,
Okay.
what I'd like to do is just, can I rattle off a bunch of questions and can we quickly
Absolutely. Let's
go
go.
through several of them, and then we'll pause so you can continue. Tell me, what is your time frame for completing your presentation right now? How many more minutes?
Let's see. So I have maybe about 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay, then let me ask a few questions and then
Sure.
I'll pause and we'll let you finish up here quickly. Or let you finish up, I shouldn't say quickly. Okay, let me scroll up. I have like 4 pages of questions for you.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
okay, what do you mean by above the fold when you first started talking?
Above the so margins, that's just on that formatting piece. When you say we're using a blank Word document, usually your blank Word document is going to have at least 1 inch margins around your page. The most you want to decrease that to save space would be 0.5. So it's more so just talking about those white edges of your resume.
Okay. And somebody asked, how do you distill 30 years of work experience into a one-page resume? Well, you don't, right?
You don't. And that's a good question. So the rule of thumb, and I know a lot of people hear this, is only have 1 page resume. That's not realistic for someone that has 30 years of experience, right? So what we can do is we can try to look through your resume. And again, this is what we help people with. We could probably crunch that into 2 pages because again, if we're not going beyond 10 years back, or maybe going through, I would say using bullets for more than 10 years back, we should be able to stay within that two page range. Now, if you're applying for different positions, a federal resume, we're not going to be able to get into that. I do have a slide on that for some resources.
Mhm.
That might look a little different. Or if you're submitting a CV because maybe you're going into academia, maybe you're going into like a faculty position or instructor position, a CV looks different than a resume. There is a difference. And I can put some information in the chat about a CV versus a resume. So your CV doesn't necessarily have to be a specific length, right? But your resume, I would say we try to keep it within 2 pages. Remember, as employers are skimming your resume, that's 6 seconds, right? Now, again, that's that initial scan, but they're really not going to read beyond 2 pages. So what we want to look at is what is the relevant experience that we can add into your resume, and understanding there may be some things that we can take off your resume. So I would not stress and panic about trying to get all of your information in 1 page. That's just not realistic for our population.
That's great. And that actually covers some of the questions about people who said they're used to federal resumes and they're very long. How do you condense? And I think you just nicely
Hmm.
answered that question. Um, the other is there assistance with professional profiles on LinkedIn and optimizing LinkedIn use? Um, so does Howard Community Career Services offer anything on LinkedIn? I know LinkedIn itself has
We
some classes you can take.
Absolutely. Yes, there is LinkedIn Learning. I would definitely encourage you all to use those resources on the actual software, the platform. LinkedIn Learning, great information there. But yes, we do provide assistance with LinkedIn navigation. So you can schedule an appointment with us. We can give you a profile review. We can answer any questions you may have about navigating LinkedIn. So yes, we can assist there.
Okay. Are PO boxes okay on resumes?
Say that one more time.
Are PO boxes okay on resumes?
Pew boxes.
PO boxes? Mailing,
PO
post
boxes,
office?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
PO boxes, I would not put any mailing anything on that. Again, if you just want to put your city and state, or you don't have to put any information as far as your location. The biggest thing is making sure that you have your contact information. I always tell people an employer is not going to mail you a job offer or mail you an interview invite. So for your resume, you want to focus on your contact information. Now and again, the application, you might have to add that information in there, but I would stay away from adding any PO box or physical mailing addresses.
Okay. And for email addresses, we're talking about like a Gmail account that's people can
Yes.
understand and not your current
Yes.
employers. Okay. So don't do that.
Right. Yes. So
So don't
you
do
want
that.
to add your personal professional email. And again, you can create a new email specific for job hunting so that you're not spamming your everyday email with that information.
And do you know why employers require you to list professional reference contact information in the application phase before they interview the candidate? Is there a way of withholding that reference contacts? That was,
Good question. So yeah,
yeah.
it's usually a part of the application process. I can't tell you why exactly. Some employers might have it beyond that. I have a slide where you don't want to add that to your resume, of course. But there may be, I have, even in my own personal search, there have been some times where I might have skipped that area. But I always say, like, if they're asking for it up front, then that means they don't have to communicate back and forth trying to get it later on. So I would go ahead and have all of your references, ask them, is it okay if I use you as a reference? Go ahead and have that on a separate sheet so that you can just copy and paste and plug it into the application. If you're not comfortable doing that and you can bypass that in the application, I would say that's on you to do, but I will always encourage people to fill out the application as much as possible. So if you have your contacts, go ahead and add them to the application.
Okay. Would
But maybe
you,
some of the employers can ask why it's in that early phase.
yeah, that's a good question. Do you need to send a PDF or a Word file, which is best for your resume?
Oh, y'all getting ahead of me. So yes, we want to add a PDF. You want to convert your resume to a PDF, and that way, when you're adding it into the applicant tracking system, it doesn't knock your format out. Sometimes, when you add them into the system as a Word doc or a Google Doc, the system could shift your information, and you want to make sure that it is the standard way that you set it up. So a PDF will lock your format in position. So yes, PDF.
Okay. I'm going to ask you two quick questions and then let you get back to your
Sure.
presentation because I don't want to jump ahead here. Getting getting back to the email, somebody said, is the AOL email address showing their age?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, it is.
Yeah.
Um, which is why even in the slide, and I should have said that, I would encourage you maybe to stick to a Gmail. Again, those are free to create. Sometimes Yahoo will even date you.
Mhm.
So a Gmail is, Google is the top or modern, quote unquote, modern company now. So I would encourage you, if you are able to create a Gmail, or if you have access to Outlook or anything like that, to use those.
Okay.
Good question.
And the last question, what do you think about putting how many years you were on a position as opposed to the actual year? So like 2023 to 2025.
So yeah, so you can add dates. Again, if it's within that 10 year range, then yes, I would add the date started, which it would just be the month and the year. So if you were there from May 2023 to present, then you put May 2023 dash present, or you will put May 2023 to February 2025. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll highlight where I left off. Thank you.
No problem. My apologies. I was not looking at the questions. I would try to slow
No,
down,
no,
but again,
no,
I'm
no.
here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Q. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So your education section, if you graduated, 10 years ago, don't put your graduation date on your resume. So you still want to have your education, whether that's your college degree, or maybe you have an associate's degree or your high school diploma. If you have any college experience, again, remember we're kind of looking at it as a reverse chronological. You want to put your most current degree and then in descending order. So if you have a bachelor's degree and an associate's degree, your bachelor's information should go first. Or if you have a master's or a doctoral degree, that information should go first and then in descending order. If you have an associate's degree or if you have a bachelor's or higher, you do not have to add your high school diploma. Okay. You do not have to add any high school information. And this is something we even share with our college students. Once you add that associate's degree, once you add that bachelor's degree, your high school information can move from your education section. So again, I have a little example of what your education section could look like with your college, your institution, the city and state, and then where we bold the degree that you have and the major or your concentration, and then with the year that you graduated. Now, and again, you can spell out your degree, so you could put your Associates of Arts, comma, accounting or whatever it may be, or your Bachelor of Science, your Bachelor of Arts, Master of Science, Master of Arts, continuing. So you can put that, but it is good to bold that information, your educational degree, and your concentration, because again, as employers are skimming information, that is that piece that could stand out. Now, and if you graduated over 10 years ago, you can still add your education and your degree, but you would remove right here where it says the date that you graduated, right? Now, if you are a recent graduate, then your education section might be towards the top of your page. I would say if you graduated within the last couple of years, it would be your professional summary, your education, your skill section. Now, if you graduated 10 plus years ago, your education can actually be at the bottom of your resume, because again, you have a lot of experience, or I'm going to assume you have a lot of experience that would gear more towards than just leaning heavily on your degree, as we encourage some of our students who are starting to build their experience sections. So this is kind of what you can add into your education section. Now, if you have, maybe you don't have a degree, but you have certain certifications, then you can add that as well. But you wouldn't necessarily label it as education. You could have a section that says certifications, and you can list out those certifications in lieu of your education. Okay. So again, I mentioned a little bit about creating that targeted resume, so I don't have to go too much in. Again, these links, I will make sure I put that in the chat. But again, make sure you start your bullet with those action power verbs. So every bullet should not start with responsible for. And I would say any action power verb that you use, you don't want to be redundant in using that action power verb for each bullet. Try to use a variety of different ones. And again, I'll send that resource to give you the list. But I do not start your resume with responsible for your bullets. Use those keywords, right? So I always say the job description for an employer or for a role is the ideal candidate of what they're looking for to fulfill that role. So don't shy away from using those keywords. If there's specific skills or specific experience they're looking for, make sure you're using those words in your resume. Again, it's not a copy and paste, but make sure you're using those keywords you see littered throughout that job description. And then it gives you right here this link for understanding how to go through and read and really understand what the job description is providing, whether it be qualifications and an overview of the role, the skill sections, the education necessary, whatever it says in there, you want to make sure that it shows up in your resume. And I do want to reiterate, when I say creating a targeted resume, it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch and create a whole new resume every job you apply to, but you might have to tweak some words to make sure those keywords are in your resume. So you may make a copy of your resume and then go in and tweak it. Or some people may make industry targeted resumes. So for that specific industry, because maybe you're applying for different customer service roles, maybe you're applying for project management roles, right? So you have a resume for project management, maybe you have a resume for customer service. Those are the roles and how you can target your resume. So again, this slide is just showing some information and some resources that I'll make sure I put into the chat. Best practices. So again, we already kind of mentioned those references. Please do not add your references to your resume. That also is going to date you. You want to have a separate sheet of your references. And usually your references include, I would say, just always keep in your back pocket or on your reference page 3 to 5 references. Usually employers only ask for 3, but it's always good to have some backups. So you want to have their name, their job title. If they are retired, you can put, this was their last title, the title that you have experience with, and you can put like dash retired. You want to add their information. So what organization it was they're with or they were with, their contact information. For me, just my personal, when I create a reference page, I add their phone number and their email. And again, when I reach out to them to say, hey, I'm going to start applying for jobs, may I use you as a reference? If they say yes, I'll say, are you okay with me adding your email and phone number? And if so, which ones would you like me to use? Now, if they are currently in their working professional, you want to make sure that you add those contacts. So their office phone number, their work email, because again, that shows that they're maybe still in those roles. But that's the information that you want to add for each reference. Again, their name, their title, the organization, and then their contact information. When you're applying for roles, make sure it's something simple, but make sure you're following the directions of the employer. If let's just say one of the employers today say, email your resume and cover letter to this email, right? Sometimes they may even say with the subject line, and they give you a subject line. If those are the directions, make sure those are the directions you follow. You want to submit your resume and cover letter in PDF form. Make sure you use that specific subject line and you email it to the email address that was sent to you. If they say, apply for this role through this link, maybe it's an external link to the company page, make sure you do that. If they say apply for this external link and then email me and let me know that you've applied for the job with this subject line. Again, just giving some examples, but make sure you follow all of the directions that the employer gives you as to how to apply for the role. We kind of already talked about format, but make sure your format is consistent with the font and the size. So we mentioned some of the fonts that you can use. And again, you all will have access to this PowerPoint, but also even the size of the font. I always say, someone has to read your resume, right? So it's not only the scanner, but let's say it makes it to the hiring manager. Somebody has to read that resume. So you want to make sure that your font, honestly, the smallest you want to go is 10.5. Sometimes people would say no smaller than 10, but 10 is a little small. So I would say no smaller than 10.5, no bigger than 12. As to when you're putting your information, and then make sure that information is consistent throughout. The only area where your information or the font size might be a little bigger is your contact information. Maybe you bolded and increased the size on your name, but everything else should be the same size and font. Make sure you proofread your resume. Have somebody look it over. Of course, we are here to support you as well. We try to assist as many people as we have capacity to. But if you don't use our services, if you have somebody that works in maybe HR, you have someone who just looks over resumes, right? Try to get them to look over the resume because sometimes we'll miss some of the grammatical errors or the format errors, but somebody else's eyes can pick it up. So we do encourage that. And as I mentioned before, make sure you submit any of your documents as a PDF so that the format does not switch out. Um, I want to pause if there are any more questions before I move to this section.
There,
I'm almost finished.
okay, there are several more questions, but how about if you finish and then we'll go from there?
Sure. Yep. This is my last, I think close to last slide. So federal resume, again, we did not have time to go through all of this information. And as Ann mentioned, some of you all have federal resumes. So maybe you're just trying to update that resume, or maybe you're moving out of the government and looking for different roles, right? So you might have to take your federal resume and switch it into a reverse chronological resume, which is not it doesn't have to be as hard, but again, we will assist you with that. But if you are looking to go into the government or the the federal role, excuse me, allergy season. If you're looking to go into those roles, then you do want to make sure that you submit a federal resume. The format is a little different. The information is a little bit more. I would say expansive. They might want to know like your supervisor information or how many hours you work. So the format does look a little different for a federal resume. And this is a great resource. Again, I'll make sure it's added into the chat. This is a great resource that you can use to not only see a federal resume format, but also what to include on that. And then, of course, USA Jobs is a great website to look for those roles as well. So I'll make sure that you have these resources. Um, but this is an entirely different type of presentation as to go through what this looks like. And that is it. This is our contact information. Again, we have our website here. So if you just go to HCC's website, you can search career services, or this is our website, and I'll put that in the chat as well. If you are familiar with QR codes, you can scan that and get our website information. It gives you information as to when our drop-in hours are, how to schedule an appointment. We do use a system called Handshake to schedule appointments. But if you want to call our office and try to schedule an appointment, we can help you through that process. Again, we're here to support you in the ways that we can. But this is just this information. So I'll take any questions. I know we have a few minutes. So any questions?
All right. What I'm going to do is, Paul, let me know he's actually been responding to the texts behind the scenes, which are wonderful. So I'm going to work
Awesome.
my way up from
Okay.
the most recent ones. Um, let's see. Someone said, per this presentation, I need to update my resume. How should we deal with delaying sending our resume, or should we provide the resume we have available today? So if there's a job that somebody wants to apply for, what do they do?
I would try to, unless it's like the employer says, I need you all to apply today specifically, I would try to update your resume. Because again, you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. And I always say, a lot of times your resume introduces you before you ever get to speak to the employer. So I would update your resume if you have the time to. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And if your former employer has moved on to another company, you put in the references where they are currently located, correct?
Yes. And you can say for like their title, you could put their title and then in parentheses, you could put former supervisor at X, Y, and Z organization. But yes, you want to put their most current information because that's how the employer is going to contact them if they decide to reach out.
Okay. And how does somebody put on temporary work? Because that's a great question. A lot of people are doing temp work right now. What do they list, or they're doing contractual temp work? How do they list it on their resume?
So it's fine to put contract. Some people freelance, and that's fine.
Mhm.
Some people's experience isn't always with an organization. Some of you all might have been entrepreneurs or freelancers. That's absolutely fine. It's still experience. So you can put contract, or you can put temporary role. That's absolutely fine, and that might even help the case. Let's say if you're in a space where you're adding those dates. Let's just say you worked for maybe 3 months. To some employers that might be a red flag, and that can be another conversation as well. It shouldn't be, but it could be a red flag. So if it's a seasonal role or a temporary role or contract role, it's absolutely fine to mention that. If it's
And
longer, then of course you don't have to worry about a red flag, but it's absolutely fine to put those.
okay. And if I don't recall, did you say anything about cover letters? Because people are asking, should they create a cover letter? Should they submit it if it's not asked? I mean, what do you
Good
do?
question. So we did not get
Yeah.
into cover letters. So cover letters a lot of times are optional. But I always encourage people to submit one, whether the employer reads it or not. Let's just say if you're in a space where maybe you have some gaps on your resume, or maybe you're looking to go into a career change, or maybe you just want to expand a little bit more so you can really talk about your experience in a narrative way, then I would encourage you to submit a cover letter. It's never going to negatively impact you to submit a cover letter. And in our resources that we will send to you, we have a cover letter format so you can review that as well.
Okay. And then oops, I just lost my place with this one. Hold on a second. if you have a reference, if they were a client, not, excuse me, Alan with you as well.
Yes.
If they, if they were a client, not an employer, that's still okay as a reference, correct?
Absolutely. Again, some of the roles that you are in was very client based. So if you did work or your experience is working with a specific client, that's absolutely fine to use them as a reference. Again, the thing is, of course, we don't want to use like family members or someone like that. But yes, if you can definitely use a client as a reference.
Okay, and and this is common in this area. If you, we have a lot of people from all over the world, they come in with diverse experience in their country. How do they explain that with using US standards, I guess would be the word being used here?
Yeah. Sure. So yeah, so if you have experience internationally, you can still, of course, you can still set that up on your resume the same, right? Because if we're talking about a role maybe in a different country, um, I'm going to assume we can still name the organization. You still have a job title or position title, and you still have those dates. Again, if it's within that rule of 10 years, so we can still share that information now. And I will say, if you are in a space where maybe you worked and you had a specific clearance, and there's just information that you can't share, then you can of course add that. Like there's only general information that you can share in your resume bullets. You don't have to go into detail with any information that you are not allowed to share with your resume. And I would say most employers, they kind of they understand that. So you should still be able, and maybe I'm not answering the question, but you should still be able to talk about your experience, whether it's within this country or internationally. And then if you're applying for a job, maybe that is globally, that's going to add to your experience because you have international experience.
Okay, that's great. And we're going to end it with one last question. And
Okay.
if, do you and Paul still have time to answer the questions in chat?
Yeah, we'll stay in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so, Paul, I'm going to ask you to send a chat message to Kara and let her know where you are so that you all can just go on down from there because our last question is at 11:04. Um, and the question that was asked is how do you, can anybody use your career? Do you assist non-Howard County residents at HHAC Career Services and what, how do you qualify to be able to get help from you all?
So yes, anyone can use our services. We do try to, I would say we do try to help our local community.
Mm.
But yes, if we have capacity, so we are a small office. I will say that we are a small office. So I will say we try to help everyone within our capacity. So if we have that availability and time, so scheduling an appointment is, I would say, the easiest route to go. But we do have those drop-in hours on our website that happen daily. So if you want to just stop by, now our drop-in services are about 15 minutes max. Now, if we have people waiting behind you, we have to only stick to the 15 minutes. If we don't have anyone waiting, we can continue to assist you. Um, and those drop-in hours and our appointments are in person and virtually. So on our website, it gives you the Zoom link that you can come into for drop-ins. And then if you want to schedule an appointment, you can call our office or you can go to our website to set up a handshake account so that you can schedule an appointment. But I would say if you're like, okay, I'm a little confused, just reach out and call our office
Okay, that's great. And then I'm going to just say to both you and Paul, when you're in chat, if you could respond now directly to the person who
directly.
asked the question, that would be wonderful. You both have been
Absolutely.
amazing today, and what an excellent presentation. Thank you, thank you. This has been so helpful, and so many good questions. And thank you for being here today. Greatly appreciate it. And we're
Awesome.
going to,
Sure.
Thank you all so much and
Thank
best
you.
of luck.
thank you.